What are some R-rated things that probably happen in the world of Harry Potter that the story doesn't address? A couple taking Polyjuice potion with each other's hair to bang each other as each other. There must be a huge black market for celebrities' hair, obtained from hairdressers or something similar. Wow, holy fuck, I would have never thought of that. But that's exactly what would actually happen. There's gotta be another way to conjure a copy of a person with relative ease in the world J.K. Rowling laid out, right? I just realized that Hermione turned into a cat girl in the books. It could get really weird. Wizard furries have it much easier than regular muggle furries. Weird fetishes like vor, too, I'm sure. Polyjuice potion is supposed to be a fairly difficult potion to brew. The 3 times that we've seen it used, it was brewed by 2 very skilled wizards, Crouch and Moody, and an advanced student, Hermione. The textbooks they used were pretty shit at giving instructions, probably due to "this is the way we've always done it" mentality. Remember when Harry got the textbook with the scribblings in the margins that showed alternatives and he was suddenly way better? I don't think the potion itself was especially different, at least not compared to something like Liquid Luck. It's just that you had to be good at the art of making potions to make the shitty official way work, which would be much easier if you were actively practicing, like a student. Remember that lady with a tray full of fingernails in Nocturne Alley? Think about that. So now I can have sex with anyone I want, but I only can if I have a willing sexual partner that I can turn into anything I want. My world is no different with or without magic. Or just your crush's hair. You could steal a tiny bit, become them for a few hours, and look at them naked without them ever knowing. Take some nudes of yourself as them. Blackmail the crush with them. The Harry Potter world is a pervert's paradise. You could fake sex scandals, and real sex scandals could be covered up. Oh shit boy, that's complex. There is a part in the books where Harry is in Nocturne Alley and sees a witch carrying a bunch of toenails. So it's definitely canon for a black market Polyjuice ingredients. So, as a dude, if your girlfriend pounded you with your dick in your pussy, when the potion wore off, would your now gone pussy hurt, like on the inside, or would your balls now hurt because your dick is back? What if she came in you? If I took Polyjuice potion of my mate and impregnated my wife, whose legal child is it? Is it still your DNA when you are under the influence of a Polyjuice potion, or does your DNA transform as well? Could modern DNA forensics tell if someone is hiding under a Polyjuice potion? If you pull a Barty Crouch and maintain the Polyjuice for 9 months, could a dude carry a baby to term? I submit that in the pureblood families this has happened at least once and everyone involved is magically sworn to secrecy. Not to mention transfiguration. You know, a small pocket of the wizarding world has dabbled in bestiality roleplay. In the Culture series, there's a couple that take turns switching sexes so they can have each other's babies at the same time. It's the ultimate and romantic gooey bullshit, but I guess if you live 400 years you can afford that sort of thing. Speaking of that, I would totally see myself using Polyjuice potion of my husband just to bypass having a period. I don't know if he would like that as much, but not having to deal with cramps would be a blessing. Pretty sure there would be a spell for the lady wizards to not have a period though. Non-menstruatio. The implications around love potions and spells are disturbing to think about. Even the books touch on it a little bit with Voldemort's parents. Love potions are more or less the perfect date rape drugs, and yet they are openly and legally sold to teenagers. In fact, I cannot think of a single good use for a love potion. Rowling did not think this through. The Imperious curse that removes free will is unforgivable. But the potion that forces you to love someone you normally wouldn't is a-okay. I did think that was super weird. If I recall, I think the book mentions that the love potions sold in joke shops were extremely mild versions of what the potion is actually capable of. Even so, you could easily trick someone into sex with just a small box of chocolates. Really disturbing. If I recall, I think the book mentions that the love potions sold in joke shops were extremely mild versions of what the potion is actually capable of. They were sold in joke shops, but I can't think of a single mention of them being mild. In fact, Hermione in HBP mentions the ones Harry got from Romilda probably work since they got them from Weasley's Wizard's Wheezes. Ron ended up taking it and had a full-on obsession before he got poisoned. Pretty sure they're still the real deal. And that was generic merchandise. Even if that effect only lasted an hour, that's like 59 more minutes a typical adolescent would need to do some pretty illegal shit. Edit. For all of you saying they're aged more concentrated potions by the time they're eaten, Hermione mentions that they probably work immediately following Romilda giving them to Harry. Hermione doesn't usually get that kind of stuff wrong. Trust in Hermione. Stay away from dodgy love potions. The potion got stronger because Harry let it sit instead of throwing it away. So a teenager can easily make their date rape drug worse by letting it sit. That ain't a good thing. Oh cool, so you can effortless turn an innocent crush potion into a full-on mind control rape serum just by leaving it in your closet for a month or two. That's safer. Ron also ate basically the entire box of potion-laced chocolates, right? Maybe that had a bit of reason behind the intensity? I would think it was stronger in the movie canon because Ron ate a whole damn box of it instead of just a few pieces. If they are so mild, WTH happened with Ron and Romilda Vane's potion from www? I think I remember something about it being expired made it way stronger, like she gave Harry the chocolates some months before, and then Ron assumed they were one of his Christmas presents. She gave them to Harry for Christmas, and Ron thought it was his birthday present in March. In fact, I cannot think of a single good use for a love potion. 100% agree with you on everything else. However, for this, the one thing I can think of is that I can see consenting partners taking it to intensify their experience. I wouldn't be surprised if there were love potions marketed for that specifically. Full stop. It sounds like the perfect remedy to spice up a dry marriage or dead bedroom, as a strict, heavily controlled prescription medicine. I believe that's sort of the point. As a kid, love potions are innocent and not rappy. The whole concept of rape is absent. Rape is probably looked at very casually in the wizarding world. Only real explanation for it. Given how backwards they are in certain areas, this is extremely likely. Aren't they really hard to make, thus making them very rare? The ones sold by Fred and George were really minor ones as well. Romilda Vane got hold of an apparently pretty potent one easily. Also, I fail to see why their rarity would have any relevance to whether they should be illegal or not. She didn't love potions have kind of an expiration date, and after that date they get dangerously potent and their effects amplified. Since Harry chucked the chocolates and Ron found them months later, the potion inside them had expired. So all that is required to get your hands on incredibly potent rape drugs is to buy normal ones and then wait. I guarantee there is at least one person out there who is addicted to Felix Felicis, the luck potion from Half-Blood Prince. I mean, if it can get you a perfect day, Don't you think there is someone out there who brews that stuff on bulk? Or even a company that just sells that, and uses it every day to try and have a perfect life? Maybe there's a rehab center or a Feliciholics Anonymous for people who are Felix Felicis addicts trying to quit, similar to actual drugs in the Muggle world. If I remember right in the books, and probably in the movies too, it was said that Felix Felicis is highly addictive, but when used too much will fuck you up and even cause death, really similar to some real drugs we have. It is very difficult to produce, so I doubt that it can be produced in mass. I think it would be like a drug for the rich. Manage to make it once, then take it and luckily make 100 more potions. Step 4: profit. What exactly was Aberforth doing with those goats? Inappropriate chums can mean quite a few things. J.K. Rowling was asked in 2007 what exactly Aberforth did to the goat to be prosecuted. Below is a transcript of the interview. Q. In the Goblet of Fire, Dumbledore said his brother was prosecuted for practicing inappropriate charms. J.K.R. buries her head to laughter on a goat. What were the inappropriate charms he was practicing on that goat? J.K.R. How old are you? Q. 8. J.K.R. I think that he was trying to make a goat that was easy to keep clean. Laughter. Curly horns. That's a joke that works on a couple of levels. I really like Aberforth and his goats. But you know, Aberforth having this strange fondness for goats, if you've read book 7, came in really useful to Harry later on. Because a goat, a stag, you know. If you're a stupid Death Eater, what's the difference? So, that is my answer to you. I am roughly 40 and this does not make any sense to me. I know there is goat sex involved. That's what I would assume from inappropriate charms, but none of this JKR answer makes any sense, regardless of age. She couldn't exactly say Aberforth loved to bury his dick in a goat at the end of a long day to an 8-year-old, now could she? It's a school with 100 empty classrooms and abandoned spaces with hundreds of horny teens running around. I want to know more about wizard birth control. They've gotta have better shit than we do. Not to worry. Pretty sure there's already an old joke about the fetus deletus spell. I'm sure they would have a potion that makes them temporarily infertile. I mean, why wouldn't they? They've got magic, for fuck's sake. I'm sure the whole school has a ward on it that prevents conception on school grounds. Would probably be easier to implement. You would really want to make sure kids don't know that spell exists. It sounds like inviting trouble. To be fair, it was mentioned several times during the series that the school has a number of property-wide wards on it. Wards that prevent apparition. Wards that break Muggle technology, and so on. Having internal safety wards like the one I mentioned isn't that big of a stretch, and could be lumped in with Rowling's vague explanation without specifying what it does. Oh no, it makes sense. I could 100% buy it could happen. You just as a teacher wouldn't want kids to know they can bang without issue. Is this why the Weasleys had so many kids? Arthur and Molly went at it all the time when they were young and didn't understand the consequences. Then they graduated. They just couldn't keep their hands off each other. Canon is that they tried as long as it took until they finally had a daughter, and X200B. But yours probably also plays a part in it. I read someone else mention this on Reddit a while ago and it amused me. The fact that McGonagall turns into a cat means that everyone has almost certainly seen her anus. I'll give you the same reply I gave them. Not if she gets a Twinkle Tush WordPress webpage. That picture is so horrible that I don't know whether to upvote it or downvote it. I absolutely believe she would keep her tail down to avoid just that, and I'm sticking with it. Someone probably at one point stuck their wand up their own ass and used an illumination spell to turn themselves into a jack-o'-lantern. I know I would. I'm not sure if I want to go to your Halloween party or avoid it at all costs. In the last book, it's mentioned that many of the first-year wizarding students had simply gone missing without explanation. Because of the Death Eaters on the loose, these kids are never found. It's pretty frickin' dark to imagine the Hogwarts Express getting stopped and boarded, and all the young first-year students getting escorted to concentration camps. It just takes one asshole witch wizard to get away with a whole lot of sexual assault. Who needs a roofie when you can stun someone and wipe their memory after? My canon is that Lockhart raped loads of kids in Hogwarts and then memory charmed them so they wouldn't remember. I mean, he used Obliviate all the time on the people whose adventures he stole. Why wouldn't he do the same on 11-17-year-old teens? Why wouldn't he do the same on 11-17-year-old teens? Because he's not a pedo and not a rapist. I mean, I don't factually know that this fictional character isn't, but I don't see any reason to believe that he is. He could have gotten away with all sorts of shit, but there's no real evidence of anything like that. Edit. Scroll down to see just how many people think it's totally normal to rape an 11-year-old. We all know girls don't become attractive until the day of their 18th birthday. This is dumb. You sound like one of those people who think Mr. Rogers was definitely a pedophile because you wouldn't just be around kids like that all the time and not be a pedophile. Well, I will at least say that by comparison, Mr. Rogers was a man of moral integrity and Lockhart sure as fuck wasn't. What if you rape them and then use the time turner thing to go back before the rape? Is that actually rape? But you can't interfere or you risk creating a paradox, so unless you go back and stop yourself from committing the rape, yes, it's actually rape. Really attractive witches wizards selling bits of their hair for use with Polyjuice Potion. But there are also spells to make yourself more attractive. Didn't Hermione do that with her teeth pretty early on? I think Madame Pomfrey was using a spell to shrink her teeth after Malfoy jinxed her and Hermione let them get to a more normal size before telling her to stop. Now that I'm remembering this, wouldn't that hurt like nothing else? Anybody that's ever had braces knows how bad it can be after minor adjustments, and she just shrunk Hermione's entire set of teeth at once. As if they don't have crazy wizard painkillers magical herbs to deal with that kind of stuff. The nurse lady fixed them after Malfoy enlarged them with a spell in the 4th book. I've always wondered how many sexual mishaps Madame Pomfrey has to deal with. Like, there has to be male students who tried an engorging charm at one point or another and it backfired. What about STDs? Do wizards have different STDs? Newt Scamander said that muggles have different physiologies than wizards, in context of medications. That said, can a muggle born introduce a new STD to the wizarding community? There has to be birth control charms or potions, as you never hear of pregnant students at Hogwarts. Is there an abortion spell potion? Is this controversial in the wizard world? Is there a spell that girls can use to intentionally stop a period? I mean, if you can magically straighten teeth or have skello grow, I don't see it as being that far-fetched. This isn't necessarily R-rated, but it's a bit of real-world thinking applied to the HP universe. Do you ever think about how many people must work in curse proofing? Like, there must be a pretty sizable economic sector dedicated to putting curse blockers on. For instance, basically everything that magical world leaders ever come into contact with. How many leaders around the world do you think were killed by exploding forks or furniture turning into lions or something of that nature? Magical anti-terrorism must be pretty hectic in a world where anything can theoretically be turned into a bomb with the right spell. Even when you're just casually walking through a crowd of magic users, you're essentially surrounded by a bunch of people with guns. They could all kill someone if they know Avada Kedavra. I thought you can't block that curse. So how do leaders stay safe during public events? Then of course there's Polyjuice Potion. Do you think they have a scanner to make sure everyone who enters a government building is really who they say they are? They clearly don't at the bank since Hermione was able to get in as Bellatrix. Edit. Also Barty Crouch Jr. was able to impersonate the freaking Prime Minister, not the PM but someone else important for like a year. Speaking of banks, I bet there's a decent business in making the money impossible to counterfeit with duplicating spells, otherwise they'd have a pretty crazy inflation problem. I bet there's some money in lock-proofing as well, to make sure you can't just unlock a door, vault, etc. with a simple spell. I bet for all of these things there are anti-cursing experts. Basically magical hackers, employed by criminals and terrorists. So basically the world of magical security is an ongoing race to come up with increasingly complicated spells and potions to block and unblock spells. Very interesting to consider, and it was definitely overlooked as to how easy it is to sew these sort of things. It's somewhat addressed in the Legend of the Elder Wand, where once you have it, you might be incredibly powerful but someone will find a way to kill you. I believe it is actually stated somewhere, someone else will have to cite which source, that gold is not reproducible with spells, without any logical reason being given. The only thing that can transmute gold is the Philosopher's Stone. Gold, technically money, is one of the things that crops up in the lore as non-reproducible by magic. The full list comprises Galpalad's exceptions. As Hermione points out in potions class, there's no reason given. It's effectively just part of how magic works. The punishments are pretty extreme. Azkaban should be considered a crime against humanity. In the Fantastic Beasts movie it was too easy for the main characters to be sent for execution. It also bothered me that the executioners were so calm happy helping someone die. Umbridge should not have been able to use a magical hand-scarring pen to punish people. Honestly, it feels like the lore in that world has no limits, and I'd be scared if I lived somewhere in which that was normal. Wizards-witches have probably committed some pretty sick acts because their legal system is shady. For example, they could torture someone as punishment and instantly heal them, over and over again. Or they can use a spell that forces them to experience their worst nightmares. There could be people who think that a rape case could be fixed by erasing the victims and the criminals' memories, and pretending that the whole event never happened. There could be people who think that a rape case could be fixed by erasing the victims and the criminals' memories, and pretending that the whole event never happened. On that note, how many potential magical whistleblowers from within governments and big companies do you think would be caught and have their minds wiped? How many witches and wizards overheard Barty Crouch negotiating with magical terrorists or found out that Nimbus uses slave labor to make broomsticks out of illegal rainforest wood? I bet so much corruption and illegal activity goes on among the rich and powerful in the magic world, even more so than in the real world. Because there's an easy fix as long as you catch the one who caught you. I never understood the value of money in the magical world, short of feeding yourself. Because of magical properties of food, you don't need much. Need books and clothes for school, use a replication charm. Shouldn't construction costs be dirt cheap? You could lift all walls, beams and land with ease, and you can't tell me they can't make the material self-assemble. My point is, almost anything that separates people by wealth is eliminated when you can get things so easily. But powerful and influential, yes. Apparently the coins are worth more than the value of the metal too. So you could theoretically exchange them for dollars, buy gold, make more money, profit. It has always been my belief that any form of governance over the wizarding world is tenuous at best. It's basically an anarchic society which agrees to a few rules. Considering that anyone with a basic magical education is potentially a nuclear power unto themselves, that doesn't seem terribly unreasonable. Now this is the kinda content OP was asking for, not just polyjuice shit. Never thought about half those things, but you're absolutely right. An explanation could be that our laws and rights are based on us being muggles, a wizard or witch would be capable of inflicting far more serious damage on the world than any muggle, so the punishments need to be far more extreme to act as a deterrent. I never understood how or why none of the professors seemed to be in relationships. Weren't any of them married, dating, fooling around with each other on lonely nights? Or does taking a job at Hogwarts come with implied celibacy? Which is odd. Some of the best witches and wizards of all time taught there. People would have been lining up to marry them. Impressive magic skills. Famous. Plus the purebloods would have had all that money to marry into. But we never heard that. For example, Professor Sprout was the daughter of one of the past headmasters. Or that maybe Slughorn and McGonagall were divorced. They all lived at the castle too. Except Hagrid, which it is made a point he has his own little house on the grounds. He theoretically could have had a normal relationship with a wife there, but all the others had a room quarters attached to their office or assigned dormitories. Hard to bring a date home for the night when you, an adult with a healthy libido, has to dodge around Filch and Mrs. Norris too, else risk having the entire campus gossiping over breakfast. Imagine the Weasley twins catching you sneaking in as they're sneaking out one night. Do you send them to detention, or have them bring up your escapades in front of everyone the next class? Oh, Professor, did you get any last night? She was a looker, eh? Never figured you for an ass man. If there is some expectation they won't marry, then that at least explains Snape and Lily a little more. Here you are, this rejected, angry young man, who joins the supremacist movement, but when you want out, largely because of the girl whom you never had might die, you are drafted into double agent work. Then she dies, and you spend your subsequent years surrounded by a bunch of kids, and other chronically single adults, never moving on and finding someone else. Then her son, whom she died for, comes along, looking like his douche-back father, and you have no way to express years of rejection and sexual frustration but to treat him like crap when you can. Now I'm imagining what kind of man Trelawney would end up with. Eccentric, but maybe even a muggle. Someone who has no metric for how unimpressive her divination powers are, but loves her anyway. McGonagall was married once, but her husband died. I think a lot of the professors were older wizards that had kind of done their time, divorced, widowed, etc. Harry also just doesn't take much interest, which to be fair, is pretty much believable. Trelawney was kind of an alcoholic recluse. Maybe she straightens out and finds someone nice and probably a little weird. Now I'm imagining what kind of man Trelawney would end up with. Xenophilius Lovegood would actually be a pretty good match. He'd genuinely believe every word out of her mouth. Mad-Eye Moody had an eye that could literally see through people's clothes, and he taught in a school with minors. Think about that. No. But he taught. Honestly, given what we see of him, dude was probably too busy jacking to thoughts of riddle memories. When you can transfer them so freely as wizards do, you can live out the sickest desires while never having to commit the crime yourself. There was this one bit in the books where Ron was practicing cheering charm spells and did it wrong and ended up being all giddy and laughing and had to be led away for an hour. Charm junkies. There would just be a bunch of wizards sitting in a basement duplicating and transfiguring food and water while spending the rest of the time constantly ecstatic on cheering charms. What, flying on a broomstick for hours on end does to a man's parts that must not be named? I wonder if Quidditch players have special protection for their little chaps. I hope so. For sure. I'm not 100% sure it's canonical, but at some point I came into possession of a real version of Quidditch through the ages. I believe it was originally written for some charity thing, which mentions how broomsticks were in fact extremely uncomfortable until the development of cushioning charms to make things tolerable. I would imagine modern sport brooms would actually be quite comfortable, more so even than bicycle seats and such. Daniel Radcliffe once said that filming the Quidditch scenes isn't fun. There was a spell on the broomsticks that created a cushioning thing on the seat of the broom. The story of what really happened to Umbridge when she was taken by the centaurs. I mean, in Greek mythology, centaurs were notorious for being violent towards women and raping them, so probably that. It's heavily implied in the book that she's raped, and centaurs are known for that kind of thing. They're bringing drugs. They're bringing crime. They're rapists. And some, I assume, are good centaurs. Students hooking up. Doesn't even need to be any magic involved. Maybe someone using their potions or herbology skills to make some wizard drugs. I can see Fred and George doing this. Polyjuice prostitutes. Crush doesn't like you back. Just make polyjuice with one of her hairs and have a hooker drink it. It is pretty clear that the books are all from an over-the-shoulder perspective of Harry, who is in many regards clueless or mistaken. I'm quite certain he, and Ron, simply missed a lot of what was going on. Hermione is fully informed about the boyfriends Ginny had even in her first few years. I assume the whole place is a lot more date-heavy than we know, simply because the perspective and target demographic of the books, of course, didn't show us. Let's just break some things down about the wizarding world. Some red flag stuff. 1. Everyone that attends Hogwarts has a 5th grade education. You receive your Hogwarts acceptance letter between your 10th and 11th birthday. Seems to be some uncertainty on that. That puts a kid roughly around 5th grade of elementary school, wherein they are pulled out of their education and brought into a curriculum tailored towards magic more so than academics. Yes, of course, learning about magic is hugely important and many education systems throughout the world are less than stellar. But I very much doubt the curriculum is tailored to help students learn and retain all the necessary levels of information to be able to actually interact with society easily too. Muggle society has developed in a much more sophisticated manner than the Wizarding Society. Reread Harry Potter and watch how Arthur Weasley gets when it comes to interacting with anything Muggle related. He works for the Misuse of Muggle Artifacts Office, which is focused on making sure enchanted Muggle items are kept well and clear from Muggles. He is constantly amazed at Muggle ingenuity, how they have developed the technology that they have, how things work and operate. Airplanes are a total mystery to him. Looking at how everything operates and looks in the wizarding world, it doesn't look like that is exclusive to him. I would argue that their dependence on magic to solve all things has led, ultimately, to a fundamental lack of innovation. They merely can make things fly, without ever attempting to understand the underlying reality of it all. Also, it's telling that both Hermione and Harry act very differently compared to many others because of their upbringing. Having no knowledge of magic or the wizarding world, they operated in a world where finding answers and getting results required actual application of knowledge, resourcefulness, and effort. 3. Muggle Studies, an elective taken from the third year on. Subjects include why Muggles need electricity, hangman, crosswords, and playgrounds. Most considered it an easy class, not worth taking the time in. Percy Weasley felt it should be important, in contrast, so as to help the magical community better understand and relate to the non-magical community. Let us not forget that within a century, 2 Dark Lords rose to power, both believing that all Muggles should be subjugated to the wizarding world, and they had a lot of support. Having a poor understanding of other groups of peoples and communities is an easy way to ultimately dehumanize them and see them as nothing more than tools and pawns for the government within the wizarding world is flimsy. Now, at the end of the day, wizards are humans, and human nature and politics leads to inevitable conclusions. That said, the politics and bureaucracy present in the wizarding world is nothing short of a disaster, with how easily things can change and be swayed, from peaceful and cooperate to violent and subversive. Stability leaves a lot to be questioned. To be frank, the only form of clear direction and ambition is present only when the Death Eaters and Voldemort take control. Beforehand, it was stagnant and ultimately wanted to keep its fingers in its ears. It's even telling in what became the norm, he who shall not be named, when you are afraid to speak a name, and thusly things related to the individual. You have granted a lot of power out of your own cowardice, and the wizarding world gave Voldemort a lot of power. 5. Clear separation of the magical and non-magical communities. Yes, you can't just drop the veil and hope all will be well, but really look at how things operate. Arthur is amazed at the Grangers exchanging their money for wizard money, and have their own 40M of currency. Transportation is by brooms and flu systems. Communication through birds. Buildings are hidden in plain sight. The magical community goes through little effort to ever actually live in a non-magical world, but wishes to do all it can to separate itself. Now, obviously such places that are separated must exist for the safety of everyone. But this constant separation only amplifies my third point, in that they are terrible at actually cooperating with their non-magical neighbors. So why do I mention all of these things? It's real easy to read Harry Potter and think, oh man, being a wizard would be amazing. I want to be in that world. But the reality is that things aren't better, just more of the same in a different way. They are, broadly speaking, a group of easily swayed people that wish to remain removed from a situation that cannot be solved by magic alone, interacting with non-magical people. However, they also lack the ability to take responsibility and investigate matters in a way that would actually protect those that don't even know another world exists. They wield some of the most powerful forces known to humankind, and have the education of middle schoolers and societal functionality of older kingdoms. Imagine a group of people like that existing in this world, and tell me how order is ultimately maintained. Either it isn't, and magical members of the community regularly interact and interfere with Muggle society to their own gains, with little regard to its impact, or there is ultimately a task force. Edit. I had forgotten that there is one. Obliviators. Look them up. Crazy that operates in such a way that they are regularly wiping people's memories or whole lives so as to keep a secret. Muggle saw a girl using a broom, wipe her memory. Muggle was brutally murdered by witch. Unsolved murder as far as the Muggles are concerned. Theft? Oh well. Any illicit behavior is swept under the rug in some capacity so as to not cause a public outcry. The magical community can talk about how muggles and wizards are equal, but they are pretty much lying. The non-magical community is at the whims of the magical community each and every day, and they don't want you to really know it. It's like if the Illuminati were real, but full of incompetent people who don't really understand you or your world. So, to answer Arp's question, think of anything that does happen in real life with one extra caveat. The Prime Directive is in full effect and we can never truly know it happened. The Ministry of Magic will subvert the law and idea of justice whenever anything bad happens to an average person. Imagine watching a movie where you are watching auras going around, seeing all the ways Voldemort and his Death Eaters left a trail of death and destruction in their wake, and intentionally tampering with evidence and crime scenes, obstructing justice, and interfering at every turn so we can never know who did it, or that there is a magical world out there that thinks we can't actually cooperate or be trusted with such power. And remember that Arthur Weasley was amazed by a turnstile, that most of them are probably incapable of actual problem solving and reasoning above a 5th grader level. Since magic makes everything easier, they know what's best for the non-magical community. Guys, P.S. I know the movies aren't strictly canon, but watch them and pay attention to how the muggle side of things are presented. Being a muggle is boring, dull, uninteresting, and grey. Colors are muted. Everyone acts the same. That's pretty much how the wizarding world contrasts the muggle world. Quite frankly, a wizard or witch standing up and saying we need to take control of the muggles. They obviously don't really have any idea what they are doing. We'll uplift them should happen about once a year. Edit TL. DR. Imagine a community of people that can manipulate reality and minds at the flick of a wrist and a few pseudo words. Now imagine that community with the practical education of a 5th grader. Now imagine a government that regulates said community as a bureaucratic nightmare and easily swayed and replaced. All your rated R stories will end with cover-ups and wipeaways because that is easier. And X200B. Edit 2. Well, this kind of blew up, so I guess I am going to read Tolkien next. Haha. And look into Star Trek. There were a lot of great points, questions, and answers throughout all of this that I find really interesting and will try to address when I can. And if there are any pieces of fiction you think I would enjoy, or want my 2 cents on, feel free to say something. Or there is ultimately a task force that operates in such a way that they are regularly wiping people's memories or whole lives so as to keep a secret. Muggle saw a girl using a broom, wipe her memory. Muggle was brutally murdered by witch. Unsolved murder as far as the Muggles are concerned. Theft? Oh well. Any illicit behavior is swept under the rug in some capacity so as to not cause a public outcry. The magical community can talk about how muggles and wizards are equal, but they are pretty much lying. The non-magical community is at the whims of the magical community each and every day, and they don't want you to really know it. It's like if the Illuminati were real, but full of incompetent people who don't really understand you or your world. You hit the nail on the head. There's the mention of all the memory wiping the Ministry had to do in Book 3 when Harry accidentally turned Vernon Dursley's aunt into a human weather balloon. They had to wipe her memory and the memory of every muggle that saw her. And then in Book 7, Death Eaters and their giant allies servitors wipe out an entire muggle town and the Ministry of Magic just magicked the entire muggle populace into thinking it was a freak storm or natural disaster. I had completely forgotten about that. Absolutely crazy. Any instance of people describing witches and the like can then, therefore, be attributed to them doing a poor job at finding these people and dealing with the problem. It's the worst. If the wizarding world ever revealed itself, Muggles would have a pretty good reason to be afraid and fearful, because the magical community went and made themselves a boogeyman. Think of all the people coming out and asking if the Ministry knows who really killed their cousin. What happened at this event? Heck, the question could ultimately be summed up as, why should we even trust you when they have no one to blame but themselves on that? I imagine the BDSM world in Harry Potter is much more fun and crazy. I imagine the Polyjuice potion is way more popular than the book suggested. Doubtful. The book with the recipe was kept in the restricted section, and I doubt many were allowed access like Hermione was. Her use of Polyjuice is so against her public image that I don't think the teacher would suspect her of doing such a thing. The restricted section of the school's library, might just be a pricey book down in Nocturne. Hagrid's dad was an exceptionally short man who nailed a violent, 20-foot-tall near-human, giant and pretty. Based on the description of Grawp, they look like enormous, hairless apes. There's probably a wizarding college somewhere which makes the antics and hijinks in the wizarding high school look very tame. All kinds of date rape spells, abortion spells, sobriety spells, drug trip spells, fraternity hazing rituals involving human sacrifice and conjuring demons, etc. Now I am wondering how a mover through college years in the Harry Potter universe would be. The Engorgio spell on tits. A spell that can make things big. The first thing a teenage wizard will try it on by the following: their food, their dick, some poor woman's tits, or ass. Some dumbass kid casts the spell on his balls for a laugh and suddenly can't walk around anymore. Honestly, has no one read Hogwarts? Ages story! Edit. Unfortunately the only known copy was destroyed by fiend fire in the Room of Requirement, along with the Mirror of Seaboob, and most of Filch's wooden dildo collection. Some of those kids were definitely masturbating to the thought of the professors, and not just the cool hot ones like Lupin or Lockhart. Someone was definitely jerking it to Hagrid at some point. Also, a lot of people are like all those kids alone in a big castle. They were definitely having sex, but the castle is full of ghosts. I wouldn't want to be having sex if there was a chance Peeves could just float through the door. Not to mention if Snape caught you. Sure, you could go into the one bathroom where Moaning Myrtle hangs out, because nobody goes in there, except Moaning Myrtle is in there. She would definitely be a mood killer. That said, I would guess there was definitely some shenanigans happening during Quidditch games and the Triwizard Tournament tasks. It doesn't sound like it was mandatory to go to those events, but everybody including the professors went. So you just stay behind with your boyfriend and do whatever while everybody's out. I feel like Moaning Myrtle would join in and be super freaky about it. She seems kinky, and to be quite honest, if I was a teenager at Hogwarts I'd let her. I'd redefine the story behind her name. I honestly have a feeling Ron and Lavender did more than just making out, if you know what I'm saying. On the more gory side, Rowling has never fully explained how someone makes a Horcrux, and she has actually refused to tell the public. She apparently told the exact process to someone once and they actually got really sick from hearing the details. I can only assume that beyond just murder, it's pretty gross. Heck, maybe it's an act of necrophilia. Young couples running off to elope and making the unbreakable vow to love each other until death do us part without realizing the full consequences and literally dying if they ever fall out of love with the other. What continues to make my mind whirl is that we only really see the world from England's POV. What's the magical community like in Russia? Australia? We get one little nod of a joke in Book 4, the Salem Witches Alliance, about the US. But what about the rest? and Voldemort's rise to power was in the 50s I believe, shortly after some heavy shit going down in Germany. Something to do with ethnic cleansing, I believe. What did the magical community think about all that? Surely there must be one Jewish wizard or witch somewhere in the world that had something to say about all that, and, statistically, there had to be one, at least one, person that decided to use their magic for gain in the Muggle world. Suddenly the Fortune 500 company with an inexplicable new CEO has its stock prices go up 5,000% overnight. Dude stands there in his glass tower, drinking coffee, looking 120 floors down to Wall Street, using his wand to Axio his iPhone and Lamborghini keys off the desk for his 10 a.m. meeting across town. Surely, from a purely statistical standpoint, there had to be one person that decided a lifestyle reminiscent of the mid-1800s wasn't what they wanted. I don't know about magical stitching nostalgic motifs for the full Wall Street lifestyle. I think casting magic on a smartphone might screw up the device. In the 4th book, it's mentioned that the magical atmosphere around Hogwarts causes electronics to not work properly, and that Rita Skeeter wasn't eavesdropping through Muggle means. Also, that Lamborghini can't even start up and exit the driveway in the time it takes to operate. I'm surprised there wasn't a 50 Shades of Grey spin-off for the series like there was for Twilight. Spin-off might not be the right word. Edit. Fanfiction. That's it. The politics of Harry Potter are something worth exploring. There's a Ministry of Magic and it has some sort of legal enforcement powers and its own prisons that engage in clearly cruel and inhumane punishments that almost certainly violate the ICCPR. And they claim the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom at least is clued into the existence of this society. Magic Society also has its own currency and banking institutions, so they must lend out money and, again, have a currency issuing authority. There are several problems with this. For one, sovereign states like the United Kingdom aren't super happy about another state existing in their territory and arresting people, trying them, imprisoning and torturing them, having a thriving banking sector that pays zero taxes. It also means wizards who aren't well connected to the Muggle world may not have official citizenship in any Muggle nation and are thus stateless persons. People probably use the Cruciatus curse for some BDSM kinky shit and then someone used it as torture and ruined it for everyone by getting it banned. I imagine at least one werewolf woke up the next morning vomiting bone and hair and scraps of night clothes, then saw that the cage was one charm shy of protecting their loved ones, then killed themselves. I think Lupin was giving traumatized kids chocolate edibles on the DL. Eat this, it helps. Bellatrix probably did way more fucked up things than cut mudblood on Hermione's arm. And there's no way she didn't get off a lot by masturbating to Voldemort while she was in Azkaban. Probably the only happy thought left in her while around all those Dementors. Harry and Hermione spent an awful lot of time in the Deathly Hallows alone, sleeping together in a tent, and both in very vulnerable emotional places. Harry and Hermione spent an awful lot of time in the Deathly Hallows alone, sleeping together in a tent, and both in very vulnerable emotional places. More importantly, neither had much if any alone time for a wank. Voldemort's nose is like that because of his helpless cocaine addiction. That Professor Umbridge was savagely gang raped by the Centaurs. Centaurs are basically rape machines in mythology, and it's alluded to that Umbridge has PTSD of some kind. When Dumbledore went into the forest, she was in a catatonic state. She was that way because a herd of dudes with horse cocks had ran a train on her. No one has mentioned this map of the footprints that show two people banging in the corner. Edgar base webpage. All the weed behind the herbology greenhouses. The popular smart kids coming to their afternoon lesson eating endless amounts of chocolate frogs and biscuits because munchies. Having to write home to get your mum to send a few more galleons because your tits have grown out of your uniform. And you're grateful the school shirts are plain white so it saves a bit of money. Kissing the cute boy from your house at the Yule Ball. Then he pressures you into going further because he's brought his wand and you were trusting enough to leave yours in your room. Being constantly terrified of being hit by some spiteful curse from behind because you're the wrong house. Racially motivated fights down the leaky cauldron. Because some idiot can't hold his mead. Harry definitely used the invisibility cloak to watch Ron and Hermione bang. After puberty, because I don't see them banging before the Battle of Hogwarts. We don't see any of the main characters masturbate either. Just because something isn't in the books, doesn't mean it didn't happen. Butterbeer is only like 2% alcohol, right? Are students smuggling in other types of booze? What's the drinking age for the wizarding world? Surely some of the kids are involved with drugs too. Turning into a chicken. Let a rooster fuck you. Lay an egg. After turn back into a human and eat the egg. Spoilers for the cursed child. Not sure if people still care about them. And I'm not sure how canon this is. But oh well. Voldemort had sex. Like. Full-on sex and got Bellatrix pregnant. He was about 70 at the time. Even if you say he was revived, he was most likely brought back in his 60-year-old body. I gagged when I first thought about that. I can see why you'd want to bang Tom Riddle, but Voldemort? No thank you. Also, the fact that he was able to get someone pregnant at that age astounds me. Also, a lot of spells could be used to take advantage of muggles very easily, but Voldemort's stick somehow freaks me out more. Way too many of these answers are just lol. I bet these people have sex or doot, magical weed. I don't know. You have a better idea of what a bunch of unsupervised teenagers are going to get up to in a place with more secluded corners and classrooms than you can shake a stick at? Cause I'm pretty sure sex is at the top of the list. Wizard drugs. My kid and I were actually talking about this the other day. There has to be spells that cause altered mental status, or potions that get wizards high. Gryffindor would be all over that. Gryffindor, do you want some? Yes. Just fuck any up, fam. Or, they'd stand up to their closest friends and stick to their guns by not taking the wizard drugs. Slytherin would either be dealers, and exchange wizard drugs for money, status, and favors, or they'd sneer at the thought of ruining their minds and reputations with wizard drugs. Ravenclaw, the ones who did wizard drugs would do a Howard-style retouches of their trips and figure out how to enhance their trips. The ones who didn't do wizard drugs would still be interested in the history and healing applications. Hufflepuff, they're wildcards. They're the lot that doesn't go to any of the other houses. So, their yes and no reasons and effects could be just about anything. Teachers. Hagrid is a major stoner. He buys from a dropout from Hufflepuff who runs her operation out of a magical creature supply shop. Convenient. There's got to be a charm that can make a wand vibrate. Think about it. And X200B. And if that isn't enough for you, consider this. Hogwarts is full of hormonal teenage girls. Wizards will often use each other's wands if they have to. How many times do you think a young wizard showed up to class and was like, "Shit, I forgot my wand. You'll have to let me use yours." Neville definitely uses Hermione's wand at one point. And X200B. One can only hope wand cleaning charms are taught fairly early on at Hogwarts. Slytherin your Ravenclaw in her while she Hufflepuffs your Gryffindor. It occurs to me that the wizarding world is basically some kind of uncap anti-government fever dream. Children are given reality warping weapons at age 11 with the expectation their parents will teach them to be responsible, and regulation is so lax that date rape drugs are sold in joke shops. The government is both corrupt and inept, to the point that a government-appointed school teacher can get away with literally torturing children for wrongthink. The ultra-rich can join terrorist organizations and then get off the hook because they said sorry and paid a few people off. A mass-murdering terrorist org shows up and the government refuses to even acknowledge it. So a handful of concerned citizens form a militia, teach combat skills to school children, and then fight the terrorists themselves and win. Like, the more you think about the world of Harry Potter, the more you realize it's inadvertently some kind of uncap objectivist anti-government screed. Edited because uncap wasn't the right word.